you for joining us to celebrate the launch of Shannon Reed's hilarious and heartfelt book, Why Did I Get a B? And Other Mysteries We're Discussing in the Faculty Lounge. Hello, I'm Stephanie Flom, Executive Director of Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures. Shannon's launch is part of our Made Local series, produced in partnership with the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. Thank you to the libraries, as well as our independent bookstore partner, White Whale Bookstore, where you can purchase signed copies of Shannon's books. So about Shannon. In addition to teaching for 20 years, Shannon is a contributor to The New Yorker, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, and BuzzFeed. Her essays have been published in the Paris Review, Slate, Guernica, and The Guardian. Her fiction has appeared in numerous journals, and her plays, What Doesn't She Write?, have been performed or read in Pittsburgh, Denver, Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Please join me and welcome Shannon Reed.
Hi everyone, I'm Shannon Reed, and I'm really grateful that you were able to join me to celebrate the publication of my first book, Why Did I Get a B? Thank you so much. I also wanted to say thank you to Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures for including me in their Made Local series. It's such an awesome way to celebrate Pittsburgh's amazing literary scene. So thank you to them. And thank you also to White Whale Bookstore, who have signed copies of my book available that you can order online if you haven't purchased a copy yet, which I'm sure everybody here already has multiple copies, but just in case you want another one. So let me tell you a little bit about this book. I have been a teacher for 20 years now, and this book is essays and humor about teaching. So I started as a preschool teacher in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to New York, where I went to NYU, and I got my master's degree in education. I taught at a preschool there, and I also taught at two high schools, a girls' Catholic school out on the beach in Rockaway, and a public high school in South Brooklyn, which in this book I call THSB, which will come up in one of the pieces that I'm going to read. After that, I moved to Pittsburgh to work on my MFA at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was a TA there, and then an adjunct there, and then a visiting lecturer there, and now I'm a lecturer in creative writing at Pitt, which is a huge honor for me. So writing this book was very nostalgic for me, and also allowed me to really look back over the various different things that I've learned about teaching, and hopefully crack a few jokes about them. So I'm going to read 4 pieces from this book, and the first one I'm going to read is actually the impetus for the book itself. In 2018, I wrote a piece for McSweeney's Internet Tendency, the wonderful humor website, and it actually ended up being the most read piece on McSweeney's in 2018. And it's called, If People Talk to Other Professionals the Way They Talk to Teachers. Ah, a zookeeper. So you just babysit the animals all day? My colon never acts this way at home. Are you sure you're reading the colonoscopy results correctly? Did you ever think that maybe you just don't like my colon? I'd love to just play with the actuary statistics all day. That would be so fun. I bet you don't even feel like you're at work. You're a sanitation worker, huh? I hated my garbage collectors when I was growing up. One of them once yelled at me when I stood directly in front of their truck and kept it from completing its appointed rounds. And ever since then, I've just loathed all of them, everywhere. So you're at a ski lodge. Do you just chill during the summer? Must be nice. Since my singer-songwriter thing isn't taking off yet, I've been thinking about going into lawyering. I mean, how hard can it be? I know criminals tend to like me, or at least the 2 I see once a year at Thanksgiving do. I bet that's the best part of being a banker, all the free money. Do you even read your patient charts, or do you just assign them a random dosage based on how nice they've been to you? Before you give me a ticket, officer, I just wanted to mention, my taxes pay your salary. Excuse me, my 7-year-old son, who mere minutes ago lied about whether he had to pee or not, just told me that you wouldn't give him any ketchup, even though he says he asked for it politely. Now I'm going to ask the manager to move us to another server's table and also fire you. Since you're a plumber and you're around them all day, I have to ask, do you ever find any of your pipes attractive, even though you know you shouldn't go there? Sure, the pay is low, but I bet the joy of putting together press releases for local events is reason enough to stick with this job in the events division of the Chamber of Commerce. You must really believe in its mission. Oh, you're a stand-up comedian, huh? So you just stand up there and bullshit until your set is done? Damn, look at you in that dress. Now I'm hot for quality control manager for the Western Division. The next piece I'm going to read comes towards the end of the book, and I am going to put my hair back, even though I promised myself that I would leave it down because it's very hot today. So I am so sorry. If you tuned in just to see my hair, apologies. This is towards the end of the book, like I said, and it's called A Brief List of What Students Have Called Me. And every single one of these entries is true. Shannon. Miss Shannon. Ms. Shannon. Methanon. That's many preschoolers' attempts at Ms. Shannon. Miss Reed. Ms. Reed. Dr. Reed. Not a doctor. Despite being specifically ruled out on my syllabi, someone invariably will stick with this all semester. Professor Reed. P. Reed. Mrs. Reed. No. Sharon Reed. No. Ms. Shannon Screed. I think this was a typo, not a judgment. Ma'am. Ouch. Madame. I'm into it. Miss. One of my colleagues at THSB promised the entire class A's if they could keep from calling her Miss for an entire week. They didn't even last one class. Literally, any of my colleagues' names, including male colleagues who were 20 years older than me. Mama Reed. Mom? Oh my God, I mean not mom. Lady. The Lady Reed, one of my favorites. Girl, also one of my favorites. Bitch. Basic bitch. Wishes she was a basic bitch. I do not. Slave owner. That was a THSB student's response to my asking her to be quiet backstage during a performance. My heroine. I hope they meant heroin with an E, but they didn't include the E. Wonder Woman. The nicest person in the world. The meanest professor on campus. Those last two by the same student a week apart. A fat hoe. The best. This next piece I'm going to read is a little bit longer. It's about a student that I taught at THSB, and it's called To Stand with Love. Dear Stan, I think you'd be surprised how often I think about you. I mean, I was just your teacher, not your parent or girlfriend or even your friend, really. I hope they think about you every day. I bet they do. You were deeply loved. You and me, we didn't have much of a bond. We fought most of the time, as I recall. Okay, fight is too strong a word. But let's be honest, which I think you usually were. We were not fans of each other. You didn't like school, so you were rude to me. I really wanted to help you learn, but oh, you wore me down, just having to constantly ask you to participate or at least not distract. Sometimes you wouldn't come to school or at least to my class for a while. Then you'd be back, grinning that $1,000,000 smile, flirting with the girls and brushing your hair, sitting off to the side, paying me no attention. But you were impressed the day I came in with a new iPhone. That I had continued to use my sad little BlackBerry, which I loved, grieved you deeply, and you nagged me more than once to get a better phone. I wish I had told you the truth, that I couldn't afford to upgrade it for a long time. I think we should have talked about things like this more often. I worry that each of you, the students, felt you were alone in your financial woes. Anyway, one day the BlackBerry broke, and I upgraded, and you were so proud of me. I remember you lecturing me about getting a good case for the iPhone, something sturdy that would protect it. People said you were in a gang, but that was said about every boy in the school practically. It's not that I didn't think it was true, it's just that I didn't know what to do if it was. Like many people, I found it hard to believe that someone with whom I'd had so many benign, everyday interactions could also be violent. Besides, I had to maintain my authority in my classroom, and I found that easier to do if I just never, ever thought about what any of you did in the dark. Something changed for you just before you died. I don't know what it was for sure. I heard that your girlfriend told you she was pregnant and you were gobsmacked. If so, that makes sense. Realizing you're about to become a father could make you feel a little more serious about things, make you want a good education. I always tried to get you to do the work for my class, but I didn't expect much. One day, though, you asked me a clarifying question about the essay I'd ask everybody to write. I played it cool, but inside I was pumping my fist, hugging you, waving to the cheering crowd. You were engaged and learning. Not too long after that, we fell into conversation after class. I think it was on a Monday or a Tuesday. I was teaching careers in the arts at that point, a class I was not qualified to lead. Miss Gillia was supposed to teach it, but the new principal messed up her schedule, and it got dumped on me just before the semester began, with only a day or so to prepare. But the one nice thing about teaching it was that students sometimes turned to me for career advice, which is what you did that day. You told me you were thinking of going into carpentry. I told you that that was a good job, that working with your hands can be fulfilling, and the pay was good if you got into a union. You asked me if the pay would be enough to support a family, and I said I thought so. You smiled that smile and left. That was the last time I would talk to you. I don't remember if you came to class the next few days, but for some reason I think you might not have. Maybe the events that would end your life were set in motion on that Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know. In any case, you were in school on Friday, and you turned in your homework for the first time, which thrilled me. The rest of the day went on as usual. It was sunny out for October. Summer can really linger on in Brooklyn, and it did that year. When I taught my last period that day, your classmates were like horses at the bits, inching to get out of there and into the weekend. In the time it took me to say goodbye to that class, putter around my room a bit, and wander down to the school office to wait for instructions on how I could help with the performance of the school play that night, you died. A car had driven up on the street outside our school. Someone had lowered a gun at you, and you had been shot in the face. A couple of other students were hit too, in those few minutes. It bothers me that they were unremarkable minutes for me, that I didn't even hear the gunshots. School had just let out. You and your friends and classmates were out on the avenue, on your way home, hanging out, going to McDonald's, whatever you did when the freedom of the weekend had finally arrived. And then everything changed. I understand that time is not flexible and that we cannot go back and replay events to end differently. Yet I almost always think, when I think of you, that I should have asked you to stop by to talk more about your career plans. It had occurred to me to suggest you might apprentice at a union. I could have told you that. I should have gone out into the hall and bumped fists and high-fived you guys as you left. Maybe I would have slowed you down enough that they didn't find you. I'm sure every teacher, every adult, maybe everyone at our school feels this way. You'd be shocked at how much it affected us, how word went around. I found out when Ms. Lorraine came in, shaken and crying. "Stan is dead," she screamed. We stared, stammered out questions. "He's been shot dead," she said. So much happened after that. So many people tried to help, but you were already dead. Ms. Lorraine ran back into the hallway to tell other people. Mr. Mark went running out of the office to get to you. We suddenly realized that the police lights and sirens were not the everyday chaos of New York, but were specifically there for you and the other students who were shot, who would survive. In shock, I headed to the library where the drama kids were. Ms. Duffy and Ms. Giglio were there. We hugged and began to gather whoever was around. "Stan, I wish you could have seen how upset everyone was. I think you knew you were loved. You joined a gang for the money, I think, not the camaraderie. But you would have been astounded. Deirdre cried so hard for you. I held her and let her cry for over 15 minutes. That room was full of sobbing for hours. Other people wanted revenge, to shoot those who had shot you. A lot of people sat in shock, some who knew you, some who didn't. A lot of us, maybe all of us, were scared. The police wouldn't let us leave, but after a couple of hours, they let the Domino's across the street deliver pizza to us. So that's what we ate while we waited. Enough time went by that a news website published a picture of your body, dead or dying. Part of a story that my friends texted or emailed or called to tell me not to look at, but I did. You had crumpled. You, to whom appearance and pride meant so much, had no dignity in your last moments. I'm sorry. Anyone deserves better. You certainly did. We had a weak principal that year. I know you didn't respect her. You were shot in mid-October, and she'd only been on the job since mid-August. She didn't know how to work at a school like ours, and she wasn't a strong person. She stepped aside, helpless, and her bosses stepped in. The school brought in counselors for the students, not the teachers, on Monday. We posted a beautiful mural Jeffrey made for you, and we signed it. When we came back to class for real on Tuesday or Wednesday, we looked at the desk where you had sat. And after a long, hard silence, the longest I've ever heard in my classroom, we talked about you. One of my classes from your grade dedicated the play we wrote to you. It was my idea. It was something, but it wasn't nearly enough. The kids who got shot had to be transferred to other schools for their safety. Your class never recovered. We teachers were left to get through it on our own. The principal didn't get any better. The police have a surveillance video of your killer, but they've never arrested him. Maybe they don't know who he is. I don't know. Your death seemed somehow both unnoticed and deeply traumatic. It changed me. It broke my heart. But that was all to come. I didn't cry that Friday, not until I was packing up my bag to go home, after the police said it was okay for us to leave, after most of the kids had been picked up by their parents, after Miss Giglio said that she would drive me and Miss Duffy home, so we didn't have to wait at the deserted bus stop in a neighborhood where our student had been killed. I looked in my bag, and saw that I had the folder with your homework to grade. That's when I cried. It's been 8 years. Sometimes I think about how old you'd be now, what your life would be like if you were alive. Like I said, I truly didn't know you well, so I have no real insight. No teacher wants to outlive her students. Why am I, rapidly aging, prone to defensiveness, inordinately fond of dessert, still chugging along in my mid-40s, while you remain dead at, always, 16? Why do the things you left behind still exist, but you are gone? I graded your homework. I didn't know what else to do with it. You got a B. It was the highest grade you'd earned in my class thus far. So, I guess, ever. That's all I wanted to tell you, except to let you know that every time I looked at my iPhone, I thought of you and what you said. But I didn't buy a good case. I thought it would cost too much. I broke that phone within a few months by dropping it on the sidewalk. And then I went on to break an iPhone just about once a year for the next 3 years, until I finally bought a good case for it. Just like you told me to. That iPhone lasted me until just a few weeks ago, when it finally died on my 45th birthday, which I spent in Brooklyn. It was a sunny day. I walked to the store I knew in Park Slope and upgraded to the best iPhone I could afford, and bought a sturdy case for it too. I thought of you. With love, Ms. Reed. Okay, one more. Whew, something lighter. This is the piece, also originally published in McSweeney's, that gave the book its title. It's called Why Did I Get a B? An Answer in 4 Fables. Once there was a rabbit who was brash and bold, and perhaps just a little bit too likely to interrupt the wise old owl with what he said was a question, but was really an observation. And he often did this just as she was about to make important points about a room of one's own. The brash rabbit worked hard, but not nearly as hard as some of the other rabbits in the class, which perhaps the brash rabbit did not realize, because he was always talking so much, and once talked for so long past the end of class that he kept the wise old owl from catching her bus on time, so that she had to wait for an extra half hour in a Panera, and ended up ordering one of those chocolate chipper cookies that tend to make owls gassy. At the end of the semester, the brash rabbit turned in a final portfolio that was fine and met all the requirements, but also consistently spelled all forms of there as T-H-E-Y-R-E, no apostrophe, and included a note explaining that he didn't have time to go back and change them all, since he was more concerned with his real classes for his major in bio. The wise old owl gave the rabbit a B, which might stand for brash, but which also might just be what he earned. One day on their pilgrimage to the end of the semester, a monk and his apprentice came to a river. This river, said the monk, is never the same twice. Well, the apprentice said, actually, you mean that this river is never the same twice to us. Or more precisely, you can't put your hand in the same river twice. My high school chemistry teacher, who was the best teacher I ever had because he came in at 6 a.m. to help me every day before practice, he always said it like that. A passing group of other monks and their apprentices tittered. The monk smiled at his student and said, "Thanks for correcting me in front of my friends. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you did that." "Sure," said the apprentice, who began to cross the river. I just wanted you to know what the correct saying was. The wise old monk smiled again. Then he pulled out his iPhone and sent himself a voice memo, reminding himself to show his appreciation to his student at the end of the semester. An elephant professor welcomed visits from her students on Tuesday afternoons from 3 to 4:50. One day she was visited by a mouse student at 4:45. I have so many questions about how to be an elephant, the mouse squeaked. That's wonderful, said the elephant. I'm an expert on being an elephant. Great, squeaked the mouse. But before I ask you about being an elephant, can I tell you about the rough time I'm having with my roommates? Oh dear, said the elephant. Perhaps you should talk to the resident assistant mouse about that, or even just another mouse student. Yeah, I guess, said the mouse. But I thought maybe you could help because you're a girl elephant. Oh dear, the elephant said again. I'm really so much better at just teaching you how to be an elephant. That's my actual job. So, squeaked the mouse, I've always been a heavy sleeper, even when I was just a little mouse with 50 brothers and sisters. But it's 4:55 now, said the elephant, and I have to teach at 5. But the mouse didn't stop telling her story. In fact, she started to cry. Like all elephants, the professor never forgot. The princess was concerned about the lack of learning in her land, and she called for her ladies, telling them that the one who best presented what she had recently learned would be given a priceless treasure. One by one, the ladies shared their knowledge. The 4 most memorable were as follows. One lady wrote a complicated but beautiful poem comparing the orbit of the moon to a wolf making its way through the forest. The princess was fascinated. Another lady wrote an exquisite research paper on how airlines set prices, a topic that the princess was interested in, but had never really read up on. A third lady wrote a short story based on the various uses of plutonium, yet another revelation to the princess. And a fourth lady made the princess this cute little hedgehog out of clay. The princess decided to give each of the first 3 ladies a priceless treasure, while the lady who made the hedgehog, which was totally cute, but not that original really, should receive a treasure that was not priceless, but still expensive and rare. Unfortunately, the princess forgot the ladies' names and ended up giving the 4th one the priceless treasure that should have gone to the 2nd one. Whoopsie, but it happens. There are a lot of ladies in that kingdom. Thanks so much.
Wow, thank you, Shannon, for reading those sections. They are hilarious, heartbreaking, and so insightful. You have taken us on quite a journey.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This book has, in many ways, is considered a love letter to teachers. And before we start the Q&A, I'd just like to ask the viewers if they would take a moment to maybe take a mental note and think of a teacher that they might like to thank or perhaps bless and release. It is such a hard job.
Yes, incredibly difficult.
So was there a teacher in your life who particularly affected you?
I've been so lucky to have amazing teachers throughout my entire career as an academic or a student, which goes right up to 2015 when I finished my MFA at Pitt. So many of the professors there who were my professors at the time are now my colleagues, and I'm still learning from them, and that's just a really wonderful experience. But I'd have to say that in high school, I had an English teacher named Mr. Feely, and Mr. Feely which is a wonderful name. He took the time to take my writing seriously. He was the first teacher I had who would take an essay that I had written, instead of just writing A on it and giving it back to me, he would actually go through it and be like, oh, here are ways that you could make it better, or I didn't understand this point, or your organization isn't very clear. I mean, it wasn't at all like going through the ringer. It wasn't an MFA workshop process, but just the fact that he wanted my writing to be better than just adequate for an A. Retrospectively now, I'm just like, oh, what a gift that was, because it made me exciting about writing and how writing works, and I wanted to get better.
So it sounds like you always knew you were going to be a writer.
I always wrote, but I didn't think that writing was something that I could do professionally. It was a fancy job, you know, like I wasn't a fancy person. I was growing up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I just thought that, you know, I love books. My family loved books. I love to read, but the idea of actually writing my own book just really did not occur to me. I thought that was something that wealthy people with degrees from Harvard who lived in Manhattan and drank cosmopolitans did. Like it just wasn't something that I thought I would be able to do. But yeah, I always loved to write. I love the word on the page. That's what I love.
Yeah. So you weren't going to be a writer, but your bio says that you didn't want to be a teacher or never thought you'd be a teacher. So what happened?
Oh, I should say that I didn't want to be a teacher because it was sort of the default thing that girls from Johnstown, Pennsylvania who wanted to have careers were supposed to be. It was either that or a nurse. And I was like, that's not happening. The nurse is not happening. I couldn't have done the blood and the needles and all of that. So yeah, I just wanted to be something that wasn't what everybody else said that girls were supposed to be. And so I ran away from teaching. It was just not something I wanted to do, even though I loved working with children, even though I loved working with books and literature, and even though both my grandmother and my mom were teachers, like it was in my genes. I was just kind of fighting, you know. And what happened is basically once I finished my college degree, which was in theater, definitely not prepping to be a teacher or a writer, the only job I could get was working at a preschool at my dad's church. And I was like, all right, well, fine, I'll just do this for a while because I need the money and I need to be independent. And then I will find something else to do. And of course, I fell in love with the preschoolers because they were delightful. And I was like, wait, I spend all day singing, doing crafts, reading books, and going on long walks, holding little hands. Maybe I do like being a teacher. Maybe being a teacher is different than I thought it would be. That's really what happened.
Well, I bet there are lots of students who are glad you did.
I hope so. I'm sure there are a few who are not happy, but oh well.
And heartfelt to the teachers in your family. I've got teachers in my family too. So,
yeah. I mean, I think so many of us who work with words or books or literature, if we're not teachers ourselves, we know teachers and we know that they spark that passion in us. So that's I'm very honored to be part of the teaching profession because of that.
Beautiful. So how did this book happen?
In 2018, I wrote a piece for McSweeney's Internet Tendency, which is a very popular online humor website, that was called If Other Professionals Talk to Teachers. No, people talk to other professionals the way they talk to teachers. I never get the title right.
Right, and you read that to us.
Yes, I did. And it was a huge hit. It was a huge hit, which was really shocking. I published a lot of pieces on McSweeney's, and that was the one that just took off. And I think it said to me and to other people in publishing that there was an audience for a book really exploring what teaching is like and laughing at it and laughing at students, but also celebrating the joys and recognizing the sorrows of the job as well. So it really grew from that piece. That's what kind of made everyone aware that there was an interest.
And did you get letters from people about that piece?
Yeah, I still get messages from people all the time about it. And they're almost like incoherent, sort of like masses of exclamation points. And they're always like, someone is finally telling the truth about what teaching. Like they're just these expressions of like, just joy and excitement at being recognized, at someone saying like, teaching isn't just like chalkboards and pencils, clip art, it's this huge, big profession with so much nuance in it. So they love that, which means a lot to me.
Yeah, and while that piece used humor, it still went so deep. What do all those comments mean?
I think that's the best humor, right? Like the best humor is when there's something underneath it that's making you like, exactly, like, yes, that's it. I mean, that's the humor I love, when I feel like moved along emotionally as well as just finding something funny. So I'm always hoping to write something like that.
So let's talk about humor. So you are obviously very funny, and you've got, yeah, you are. You've got a very sharp wit. We've all been with you for about half an hour now, between your reading and our talking, and we can see you have a very sharp wit.
Thank you.
How did you employ humor in the classroom?
I look at humor in the classroom as a way to tell students, like, this is going to be fine. We're going to have fun. I really try from day one. You know, like, I hope that no one ever thinks I walk into the classroom on the first day with like a tight five and a microphone, like, where are you from? You know, I just came up. Like, it's not stand-up humor.
Yeah.
But I find especially my college students are so worried and anxious and stressed out. And that's not funny. That's something that I take very seriously and really am concerned about. Students at Pitt work incredibly hard, and they want so much to do well. And often they're the first students to go to a school as prestigious as Pitt, the first people in their family to go to a school as prestigious as Pitt, and they just want to do well. And I want them to do well, but I also want everybody to just kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
And see my classroom as a place where you can explore safely and not be like, oh, I'm going to get an F, or oh, she's going to yell at me, or oh. And I feel like humor is a great way to do that, to just be like, hey, like, here, I'm weird, I'm quirky, and I'm doing okay. Like, you can be weird and quirky in your own way here. Like, you can write some bad short story, and it's not going to matter because you're trying.
Yeah.
And humor is a big part of setting that up.
Yeah, what a gift.
I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, and to sounds like it combats their fears, which writing is scary.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when we want something really badly, when something's super important to us, we forget that it's okay to hold on to that lightly as well as tightly, and to enjoy the path on our way to whatever big goal we're trying to achieve, which to me means lots of laughing and lots of enjoyment. So I'm hoping that I can encourage that in my classroom. And I have to say, I find that when I'm funny and I'm cracking jokes, the students are funny and they're cracking jokes because they feel like they can.
Yeah.
And that's just so much fun for everyone, because then it's like, oh, everyone's like, you could just feel the class kind of humming along, like it's working.
Oh, that's great. So our audience often wants to know about your writing process. So I'm wondering, as a teacher, did you keep a journal, excuse me, about your days as a teacher that you then pulled from?
I did not. I'm not a journaling kind of person. I've often wished that I was. I think that it sounds like a nice thing to be someone who has thoughts and writes them down. What my recollection comes from is emails that I've written to people, stories that I told. My best friend Andrew helped me a lot with remembering different things that had happened. I could sort of check in with him. But I find, and I actually think this is why there aren't more books by teachers, teaching is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. And it's continual during the school year. I often worked 80 hours a week when I was teaching at the high school level at a public school in New York. That was like 80 hours a week was it. So there was no way on my one free day or my one free afternoon where I wasn't grading or doing lesson plans. And I was like, oh, I think I'll sit down and write even more about teaching. And then in the summer, we got like 2 months. And again, I wasn't like, I think now I'll reflect on teaching. Yeah. So it's all been kind of stored up here and allowed to come out. But yeah, I wish that more teachers could write, but I understand why there aren't more books by teachers.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that McSweeney's piece happened and then encouraged you to just unleash all that stuff that you've been storing up.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I've been really, really lucky. There are a lot of great teachers out there with great stories to tell. And again, I hope we can get to them someday.
Yeah, maybe you'll figure that out. Okay, I've got a question about Pittsburgh. So you came here to Pitt to study creative writing, and you received your MFA in fiction writing, and then you stayed. And it sounds like Pittsburgh has embraced Shannon Reed. You to Pitt. You've received awards from the Heinz Endowment, the Pittsburgh Foundation, the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, even from Pitt's European Studies Center, which you can tell me about that later. And all of your plays have been performed here. So we have embraced you, and we're hearing this buzz that Pittsburgh is a growing literary city. So have you found Pittsburgh to be a supportive city for writers?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, there is no way that I would have the career I have now if I had stayed in Brooklyn. I love Brooklyn. I'm always so happy to be back there for a few days. I don't want to ever sound like, oh, New York City, I don't care, because I love it. But yeah, Pittsburgh has just been so wonderful to me, and it's such a wonderful place to be, even without the awards or the acclaim or the opportunities, just to be in a place where I can make my living as a writer and a teacher and afford to buy a small house, afford to buy the organic milk that I love so much, like all those things that just enhance my ability to be a productive artist are really in Pittsburgh. I am a Western Pennsylvanian. I did grow up in Johnstown. Yeah, Johnstown. And so for me, in fact, people laughed at me when I first moved back because I was really skeptical about how big, I was like, oh, I don't know if I should go downtown. It's so big, downtown Pittsburgh. And people were like, you lived in Brooklyn? Like, you took the subway into Manhattan? But it was because as a child, Pittsburgh was the big city.
Oh, absolutely.
We only went there for a Pirates game and a meal at Max's Allegheny Tavern. And we went once a summer or once every few months because my dad loved to travel and loved Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh has always had this special place to me. But to bring it back to the actual question you're asking, so it was like biting into a chocolate that you know is going to be good and then finding out it has your absolute favorite filling inside, to realize that Pittsburgh also has an amazing literary arts scene. I always knew Pittsburgh as a theater city. Theater was my thing, and Pittsburgh's theater scene is amazing for a town of its size. It's incredible. But the literary scene is also amazing, and I think much more low-key. But wow, it's been wonderful to just see how many amazing writers there are here who I get to work with or know, and yeah, I adore it.
Well, Shannon, we are so happy that you are part of the Pittsburgh literary scene. Thank you for this incredible book. Congratulations. We're just thrilled for you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. And I'm going to sneak in one more thing. Sorry. I realized in the introduction to my video, I did not thank the Carnegie Library. And I would just really like to say that I adore the Carnegie Library. It is my favorite place. I spend so many hours at the main library branch just off Pitt's campus. So thank you to them as well. And thank you to you for this wonderful opportunity.